This game will be very interesting. So interesting, you might want to start the procedure to see if one of the players cheated. In this game, we have former world champion, 12th world champion, Vladimir Kramnik, taking on former world champion as well, 16th world champion, Magnus Carlsen. In this game, Kramnik had the white pieces and they were playing in the title Tuesday online, the past title Tuesday. So Kramnik starts. Magnus responds with A6, the St. George defense. And this is very much not common at the top level. One notable game, though, is a game between Tony Miles and Anatoly Karpov, where Karpov actually lost as a world champion back in the 80s, 70s, 80s against Tony Miles, who started with 1 to A6. If you guys are interested, I can do an analysis on that video in the next three comments. So, if Kramnik taking control of the center, thereafter we have C6. After C6, Magnus, Kramnik just continues with bishop to D3. Very standard. Magnus goes D5. Kramnik advances the pawn. So sort of French-esque now, just with the pawn not being on E6 here for black. And we have C5 then. Magnus striking, trying to break down or undermine Kramnik's D4 pawn. Kramnik says no, I'll play C3. So very reminiscent again of a French-like structure. Knight to C6, knight to E2, just adding more protection to the pawn. Takes, and bishop to G4. Kramnik responds in kind, saying no, I'll go F3, kicking the bishop away. Bishop to H5 and E6 by Kramnik. It's a very thematic concept. E6 in French like structures, if E6 is not played, you give up the pawn to you give up your E pawn, but in return, you're doubling your opponent's pawns and you're playing for positional compensation. So this is still better for white. So this is probably some prep maybe Kramnik had stored for positions such as this or a tabiat like this. F takes E and knight to C3. Better here was simply queen to B3, adding pressure on B7. And after queen B3, we'd have queen B8 and bishop F4, just adding more pressure. And after bishop F4, black would have to play the stranger queen to A7, which just looks very awkward because after 92, knight F6, and yeah, you're just playing very calmly. Could castle or go rook C1 even. So yeah, but for starters, this looks logical because if you decide, no, I'm going to go B5, well, you're in considerable trouble already after A4, right? You'd have to go B4, and it's just awkward now. And now another problem is you can't go E6, E7, E6 because you have a pawn on E6 already, the doubling up to maybe try and protect this B4 pawn. So this is the reason why uh, this E6 pawn push was so good. So as we go back then, we have f takes e, but now we have knight e3 instead of the queen to b3. Knight e3, knight f6 just developing, and now we have castles. So Magnus is now slightly better, you know, you just drop back to b7, f7, and maybe ideas of g6, bishop g7, and you're solid in your castling. So e5, d takes e. So here, after castling, e5 gives white the edge once again. It was important to go bishop f7 or knight to d7. Remember, this is blitz, so it's understandable not to overanalyze these lines. But intuitively, yeah, knight to d7 and maybe then e5 ideas, or knight to e7, bishop to f7g. This, in my mind, would still be slightly better. Uh, and after g6, bishop g7, and castles. Okay, but e5 was played immediately, which seems logical, right? Because you're striking in the center, you're trying to undouble your pawns as well to get e6. Kramnik captures, knight takes, and now we have knight to f4. Better here was just bishop to f5, and the goal is to get bishop e6 and just apply a lot of pressure on this the d5 pawn, and as well now bishop f5, bishop e6. If bishop to f7, you could just capture as well. And it's quite awkward for black to play. But that was not played. Kramnik instead went for the second best move, which was knight to f4, attacking the bishop, and now bishop to f7. And here now we have rook to e1 by Kramnik, asking this knight, where are you going, Mr. Pony? And Magnus plays queen to d6, then also one of the top moves, which is still fine. But in the next couple moves, we see a lot of fireworks happening. Kramnik goes queen to a4 check, and here it's important to go knight f to d7, and we'll see why. Magnus instead went for knight to c6, and here we see the importance of castling, getting your king to safety as soon as possible in most lines, and this is one of them. Knight to b5 then. You think, wow, Magnus is just hanging his knight. Well, not actually. I mean, Kramnik's hanging his knight. Well, that's not the case because if you capture there, you're just losing your rook. And the queen is under attack as well. So knight b5 is coming with a tempi and is very venomous because after knight b5, you want to swing. You most likely want to swing a knight to d4, add more pressure to this knight since it cannot move because the king is still in the guard of the queen here. It's pinned to it, and there's also ideas of bishop b5 after knight d4. House is crumbling for Magnus now. So only move to hold on really would be queen to d8 or b8 7, and there's more problems now. Kramnik finds his winning knockout stunner with bishop to f5, asking Magnus a lot of questions here. Now, if you go queen d8 as discussed earlier, just a move ago, now it's even worse because knight d4, you've got more tempi even, right? And now you'd have to play strange moves like queen b6, but that doesn't do much because you just get bishop e3. And now again, you're under the mask of the bishop here. Capturing here doesn't help at all. You're just throwing yourself to the wolves. Takes. Queen, knight takes, you cannot capture back, obviously. You're just getting mated very soon. Here, d8, queen takes a8, king c7, and queen c8, and mate is to follow after queen d6. King d6, bishop to c5. Look at that beautiful mate. Game over. GG's. So after bishop f5, then Magnus just gives up the queen, takes the bishop, and now Kramnik finds a beautiful knight to d6 check. You cannot take here because the rook still got the eye on the king. And Magnus had spent about over 40 seconds contemplating here where to play. And it was a 3-minute blitz game. So a lot of time was spent. And after that, Magnus just capitulated, gave up. Because after queen takes on f5, knight to d6 forks the king and the queen here. After king to d8, knight to f5 takes on f5. And in this position, on move 19, Magnus Carlsen resigned. So guys, here in this game, we learned very important lessons. Trying to castle your king as soon as possible being one of them. Because it was in this game then, Magnus did not castle and he got crushed by Vladimir Kramnik. And Kramnik still showing, yes, he might be over his prime years, not in his prime anymore, but can still definitely dazzle and dash and crush in the world. So, if you guys would like to see more on this St. George's defense with e4, I can cover the game between Tony Miles and Anatoly Karpov, which is a beauty as well. And do stay tuned for more. A new series is coming up, uh, strengthening. I'll give you a little snippet on how to advance psychologically as a chess player and grow your game and the importance of the mental aspect. So we'll be working on that in the days to come. Do stay tuned. If you really like this video, do consider commenting, liking, and subscribing. All right, guys, have a great weekend ahead. Take care.